Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Thursday afternoon. Now, it's the first Thursday of the year where we do not have a football game that we can look at or that we can preview, but with that being said, usually like the most active that the NFL remains, like in terms of talking and in terms of like stuff on the inside, it's usually around the off season. So we're going to go ahead, give a quick update on the coaching carousel and which teams are interviewing which coach, this, that, and the other, all of that important stuff. Then in the second segment, we are going to be looking at the possibility of the NFL looking towards an 18-game regular season, which is something I don't agree with. But again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in the second segment. Then in the third segment, we're going to just preview all of the playoff games that are going to go down this weekend, as well as the NCAA championship game that's going to go down on Monday. We'll just recap everything that I have to say about each team and what I think the outcomes are going to be. Then in the fourth segment, we're going to look at the Dolphins, most likely going to play in Madrid next year, and we're going to talk about like the historical significance around that, why the NFL is going to Madrid, all that important stuff. Before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether it's a hot take, burning question, something that you're dying to share, we're all ears. And if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box. Or if Super Chat's not really your thing, then you can also use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead, get into this first segment, which is talking about the the NFL Coaching Carousel. So we already discussed some of the coaches that were we already discussed some of the one of the coaches that was already off the board and one of the teams that were already off the board in their decision. We know that Mike Vrabel ended up getting hired on Sunday, so it still leaves the Jets, Bears, Raiders, Saints, and Jaguars still interviewing coaches, and also the Dallas Cowboys, who will remain interviewing coaches. And whether or not the Jets, the Bears, the Raiders, the Saints, or the Jaguars are going to be interviewing Mike McCarthy is still unclear. I would imagine that the Bears would want to follow suit with their attempted interview with Mike McCarthy, since in the beginning the Dallas Cowboys ultimately denied them for basically no reason. And we'll see if they ultimately make their decision to get McCarthy as the head coach for Caleb Williams. I'm not entirely sure if they're going to come up with a deal for that. I'm not entirely sure if they're going to be successful, if McCarthy even wants to be a coach for the Bears. But in terms of Cowboy talk, on Monday night, Jerry Jones reportedly said he had spoken with Colorado coach Deion Sanders about the position, about how it's available, and whether or not he would take that. Obviously, we still haven't heard anything from Deion about whether or not he wants to coach with Dallas, but I've said that I would much rather him continue coaching on Colorado. I think it would be much more beneficial for him and for the program, as opposed to him making a jump to the NFL, because similar to how it started in college, we were not really sure whether or not Buffalo, the Colorado Buffaloes would have been able to make any sort of noise during the regular season, or if they would surprise anyone. But ultimately, they did. You could argue that was mainly because he had some ridiculous talented players like Shador and Travis Hunter. Those two guys are just unbelievable, especially Travis. But we'll see how it goes, assuming he doesn't take the Dallas head coaching position and decides to stay on Buffalo. But if Deion doesn't land, then they have other options. They recently scheduled, as I said before in the last segment, they scheduled an interview with former Jets head coach Robert Saleh and they've also scheduled an interview with Eagles coordinator Kellen Moore. Now, it was just speculation that he would end up being one of the candidates for the head coaching vacancy in Dallas, but now it's sort of been confirmed that they're going to set up an interview with Kellen Moore. Obviously, Kellen Moore and Deion Sanders, they have been related with the Dallas Cowboys for quite some time. I believe Kellen Moore actually played for Dallas when he was a player in the NFL, so that might be where the connection all starts. But regardless, he's an interconference coach. Well, a divisional coach, excuse me. He coaches in the same division as the Dallas Cowboys coach in. Whether or not he's going to decide to join the Dallas Cowboys and be their head coach is still a little bit unclear. And I think it's really going to be determined on how much success the Eagles have in the postseason. Like, if they make it to the Super Bowl and they're able to actually make it competitive, I think that eventually Kellen Moore is going to decide to stay with Philly as opposed to going to Dallas, because, I mean, it's between staying on a team that's good enough to make the Super Bowl or trying to build up a team that you were trying to beat to eventually take them to the Super Bowl. It's like one is more difficult than the other, and right now it doesn't seem like the Cowboys head coaching spot is really a popular position. And a lot of people, they would rather see Deion in this position because it would take a lot of I heard this interesting take from one of their fans. He believed that if Deion were to be the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys, it would take off a lot of pressure from Dak Prescott, because the media would be much quicker and much more on top of Deion Sanders as opposed to being on Dak Prescott. Granted, it doesn't matter what position you play. If you're on Dallas, every time you mess up, the entire media is going to be on top of you for it. And especially, if you lose, then the media is going to blame you regardless. But there's a good chance that more blame would fall onto the head coach and Deion Sanders, because that name attracts way more people and attracts a much bigger audience, as opposed to Dak Prescott being the reason why you lost the game. Because Dak Prescott losing the game, that never gets old. That's something that is always going to be constant no matter what team Dak Prescott is going to be on. And the fact that it's on Dallas is just amplified a little bit more, especially now that he is the most paid quarterback in the NFL. So all of that attention that was on him in this season would most likely shift over to Deion Sanders, because Deion gets way more clicks. He's just a much more popular person in the football world, much more popular to talk about. For as popular Dak Prescott is, Deion is way more popular. I mean, all it took was Colorado to win 4 games last season, and they were already ranked and they were already making headlines. And the fact that they were able to continue on and win in this season, appear in a bowl game, is just, even more talking through the media, even more recognition. And whether it's because Deion coached fantastic players like Travis Hunter or Shedeur Sanders, it doesn't necessarily matter. These guys have been gaining a lot of attention. A big reason why Buffalo ended up capitalizing on the transfer portal is because of their coach, as well as the amount of NIL money that they're able to accumulate based off of their name, their image, their likeness, and the fact that they play for Coach Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, whatever you want to call it. So that's one theory. Let me know in the comments if you guys would rather like to see Deion Sanders be the coach for the Dallas Cowboys, or maybe you would like to see Kellen Moore be the coach. Again, either or would help the Cowboys drastically, but that's all that I have in this first segment. So now we're going to go into this second segment where I talk about the NFL looking towards an 18-game regular season. So I'll give the details on that right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to talk about the possibility of the NFL incorporating another game into its season to form an 18-game regular season. Before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, something that you're just dying to share. We're all ears. And if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not your thing, then you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show, makes it much more interactive. So let's go ahead, get into this second segment. So Roger Goodell, the commissioner for the NFL, he reiterated the possibility of the regular season expanding to an 18-game regular season at some point in the future. Appearing on the David Rubenstein show, Goodell said that adding an 18th game would be the logical next step for the league, and he explained the framework of the season would remain 20 weeks, with the preseason schedule being reduced from 3 games to 2 games, and we would keep within that 20-game framework. We went to 16-4 and now 17-3, so 18-2 is a logical step. So they're going to keep on going until they can max out in the regular season. In the regular season format. Now, the way that I see it, I think that this is a bad idea. And I know, a lot of people, they would rather see more football. I'm one of those people that loves football, obviously. And yeah, I wouldn't mind the notion that we would get 18 games as opposed to 17, but you also have to remember that this is a majority of the population that doesn't actually play the sport. Like, how do the people playing the sport feel now that they won't have a little bit of time off, right? I mean, they were expected to play 17 games, and that 17-game task is still a little bit it's a little bit difficult of a task as it is. And the rules and the way that the game was has been updated throughout the years, the way that the NFL owners have completely changed the game from what it was now to what it was back then, are implementing rules that keep players safer. Like, that's usually been the trend of the NFL. Like, whenever something is seen as a little bit too dangerous, then they try to fix it so that way their players can stay healthy. I don't think this move really encourages NFL players to stay healthy, because it's, like I said, it's already difficult trying to play in every single NFL game, despite the fact that they're usually separated by a week. Like, being able to stay healthy for one extra game is something that not many NFL players can say that they can do consistently. And combined with the new kickoff rules, if we do end up seeing a regular season that's 18 games, then I don't think this kickoff rule is going to go away, right? Because the whole point of this kickoff rule was to prevent anybody from getting injured. Granted, it was I think it was very ignorant how they changed the rules, allowing teams, forcing teams to tell the ref and the other team that they're going to attempt an onside kick. So everybody in the room knows that they're going to do an onside kick, making them better prepared and things like that. Like, stopping that rule change is probably one of the most absurd rule changes I've ever seen in the NFL. Like, probably the most absurd rule change, because surprise onside kicks were a major part of the NFL, and some of the greatest comebacks ended up starting from surprise onside kicks and onside kick recoveries. Now that the NFL team, the receiving team, is much more prepared to handle the onside kick, it essentially makes the kicks feel a little bit meaningless in a lot of the fan base's eyes. So if the kickoff rules, if they turn back to the way that they were and they kept this 17 game format, I think a lot more people would be more interested in that as opposed to adding another game, because again, you're just asking for your players to get injured at that point. When you're asking them to just, add another week onto the schedule. Not only that, but this also does something else that a lot of fans don't really like. It somewhat changes the record books. So, I mean, as we know, the NFL, they would add games as the years go on. So before, it was a 16 game format. That was the norm. Then the 17 game format became the norm. And once the 17 game format became the norm, because NFL players were granted an extra day to accumulate total stats, a lot of the the previous NFL record holders ended up being no more, because, I mean, Drew Brees ended up recording, like, I want to say around 5,000 total yards in a season, but this was on a 16 game format. So once Patrick Mahomes played in a 17 game format, he immediately broke that record. Then there was also the NFL rushing record, which could have easily been broken if Saquon had played the entirety of the last game. All of these records that were previously held by NFL legends are now being broken by players that benefit from having an extra game. And that gets, I don't know why it gets a lot of fans a little bit angry, but it's like every single time I look at a social media post of somebody breaking a record, then they try to put an imaginary asterisk on it saying this was an extended season with 17 games and it wasn't a regular 16 game format, blah, 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 all that stuff. But even though the collective bargaining agreement runs through the 2030 season, there is a hope that an expanded schedule should be implemented before the expiration date. NFLPA Executive Director Lloyd Howell told Mark Mask of the Washington Post on July that the league and union started high-level talks about an 18-game regular season, and he did caution that there are a lot of details that would need to be ironed out, including economic, health, and safety matters. So I already, highlighted how the safety could already be seen as an issue, adding an extra game. but nearly 60% of the respondents said that they oppose an 18-game schedule. The responding largely revolved around player health and safety, because again, that's like the most important thing when you are trying to come up with new rules in the NFL. You need to make sure that those implementations are safe and they don't end up hurting your best players, because your best players are essentially the people that make you money. Like, you don't want a star quarterback getting hurt, because then you end up losing a lot of money both as a franchise and as a league. And because because players barely make it through week 17, adding a week 18, we don't know what type of implications, they'll have long term, one player said. Because you'll see guys have high use one year, the next year they battle injuries. Physically, I think it's too much, and I know from the standpoint of the NFL, they see the money, but they're going to lose a lot of star players to injuries. And some players in the poll did say they would be okay with an extra game if it meant the NFL gave teams a second bye week during the regular season. And Goodell didn't specify in his Bloomberg interview if the second bye was something that's on the table, but he did say in October that's something that the league would look at, and a lot of that depends on, can the league continue to make the game safer? Can the league continue to modify the way that they conduct the offseason, as well as the training camp, and as well as, the regular season, so that these guys feel comfortable being able to play for that long of a period of time. So those are all that's all the news that we have in regards to the NFL changing its regular season format. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, if you guys would be excited for an 18-game regular season, or maybe you guys wouldn't be all that excited for an 18-game regular season. Maybe you would rather see the kickoff rules go back to the way that they were. Let me know in the comments what rule change you'd like to see in the NFL. So now we're going to go into the third segment, where I do a quick playoff preview of the NFL games that are going to go down over this weekend. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about the playoff games that are going to, the divisional round games in particular, that are going to start on Saturday and Sunday. And we're going to do a quick preview of all of those games. So I want to start with the Eagles game first, because we do have some information regarding the Eagles and the conditions that they're going to have to play in. So apparently, on Sunday, heading into the divisional round, there's expected to be a huge snowstorm. Yes, there's expected to be a storm, and eventually all of the field, all of the Eagles field that the players are going to be playing on is going to be covered in snow. And obviously, we love to watch these snow games, and I think that snow games are way more entertaining than regular games. Whenever there's snow on the field, obviously, it's a little bit more brutal for the players to play in snow, but it's much more fun for the fans observing. Not so much the fans observing like in the cold itself, but from their TV where it's nice and warm and things like that. So the Eagles actually, they similar to all of these playoff teams, the Eagles played the Rams before, and the last time that they played in a regular season game in Week 12, the Eagles ran for a season-high 314 yards, and Saquon ended up recording the most of those yards with a career-high 255 yards on the ground in a 37-20 win. Now, although Barkley was able to do whatever he wanted against the Rams, it's unlikely that he's going to be able to do that again in this game, and I'll give you a reason why. So, in NFL history, there have been 8 players to rush for 200 yards against a team in the regular season, and then go up and face that same team in the postseason. And Saquon is now the 8th one, so that means there were 7 before him. All of the 7 players that rushed for at least 200 yards against a team that they're going to play in the postseason were held under 100 yards in their playoff meeting. So they were able to do whatever they wanted in the regular season, but then they were unable to do what they wanted in the postseason. The defenses were able to adjust to whatever the running back was doing. So obviously, Saquon, like through most of the time in his career, he's going to have to fight against the tide and try and become the first player to ever accomplish a feat such as this. And what would that even be called? The first player to ever run for 100 yards after running for 200 yards in the regular season. I don't know what they're going to call it, but again, he would be the first player to record over 100 yards against a team that he recorded 200 yards on in the regular season. So, I mean, that's something, considering how the last 7 players that were unable to do that. So, obviously, fighting against the tide and being the first of anything is a great achievement, especially when it comes to the NFL. Because when you're in the NBA and you become like the first to do this or the first to do that, usually a lot of people can point that out to the fact that you shoot more threes, or the fact that maybe this player shot more threes, or maybe this guy's taller, this, that, and the other. When you do something first in the NFL, it's like a really, really big deal. And Fettuccine's in the chat. He's saying the Rams are winning the Super Bowl, ? No, I don't think the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl. If any team was going to win the Super Bowl, it would be I think the first option would be the Chiefs, then it would be the Lions, and then if it's not the Chiefs or the Lions, then I think Baltimore has the best chances of winning in the Super Bowl. Now, the players that I mentioned, because I mentioned there were 7 players, but who were those 7 players? Well, one of them was James Brooks. He played for the Bengals in 1990. He rushed for 200 yards against the Oilers, but then only was able to record 17 when they met in the postseason. Barry Sanders for the Lions, 215 yards against the Bucks, only 59 yards in the postseason. Marshall Faulk for the Rams, 222 yards against the Saints, but only 24 of those, but he only got 24 against them in the postseason. Adrian Peterson, 210 yards against the Packers, only 99 yards against the Packers. So Adrian Peterson so far is the best one with 99 yards. Noshan Moreno ended up running for 224 yards against the Patriots in 2013, only rushed for 59 yards in that game. Jonas Gray for the Patriots rushed 201 yards against the Colts in 2014. He only got 4 yards against them in the postseason. And finally, Ajayi forgive me if I messed up that last name, in 2016, 204 yards against the Steelers, but he only recorded 33 yards in their postseason meeting. So, again, not a lot of yards per game. That's 43 yards per game in the playoffs for a group of running backs that were all able to get over 200 against the same opponent. So, again, not a very clean situation to be in if you are Saquon, like fighting against the current like that. But that's usually what happens with NFL and their defenses. Whenever they see something that they're struggling with, they try to improve it for their next matchup, because that's sort of where coaching comes into play with the NFL, because it's like you have to come up with a game plan, because most likely the team that already beat you is going to try to use the same strategy to beat you. So it's going to come down to whether or not you can counter what they're doing and whether or not they have prepared enough counters for what you're doing. And that's sort of how the coaching battle in the NFL gets started, because it's not like you can, obviously mid-game you can try and do that, but it's a lot more difficult to try and get your players centered and focused into your new game plan while they're still in the middle of a game going on. It's not very easy for teams to be able to adjust on the fly, which is why that there are a lot of instances where teams would much rather lose in the regular season as opposed to losing in the postseason, because if you lose in the regular season, then it gives you a chance to learn what you do wrong and how you can improve on that to go into the postseason. If you have a flawless record while you're going into the postseason, then you're not going to be nearly as sharp as you expect, because you're going to go into the postseason thinking, okay, we have literally nothing left to improve on because we're winning in these games, which is why there has not been a single team in NFL history that has gone flawless throughout the regular season and throughout the postseason. It's just never happened. And the one team that came close enough to doing that ended up losing at the very end. So, yeah, let's go Giants. It's the only thing that we got. But obviously, the Eagles and Rams game, that's not the only game going on. We obviously have the Texans going up against the Chiefs. That's going to be the first game that's happening on Saturday at 4:30, and I think it's easy to pick the Chiefs in this one. Lil Fettuccine's jumping the gun a little bit there. Ohio State or Notre Dame. I have since he already brought up the question, I have Ohio State winning in this game, and I just think that the roster is at this point in the tournament, the roster is just too good to fail. And I mean, knocking off Texas the way that they did, knocking off Oregon as well the way that they did, and now they have to move on to play Notre Dame. I think that Ohio State is going to win in this one. If they don't, then that's a really big problem for them and their program. But I really think that they're going to be able to win. I mean, they have a competent enough defense to be able to stop their run game. While Notre Dame's quarterback has been solid, I would much rather have Ohio State's quarterback at the helm as opposed to Notre Dame's quarterback. And not to mention, I would also rather have everything that Ohio State has, I would rather have than Notre Dame right now. I don't mean to make it sound disrespectful, but that's just how talented Ohio State really is. Now, I already said that the Chiefs are going to beat the Texans. The Commanders, they're going to go up against the Lions. This one is going to be a very good game, I think, because every single one of the Commanders' games have been a close one. So I don't think that trend is going to change at all in this game. I do think that the Lions are going to come out on top, maybe by just a field goal, but they will come out on top. These are two teams that love to go for it on fourth down. And that's really going to be the exciting team. Which team can convert more of those fourth downs and which team can convert on the third downs, all that stuff. Now, the final game, which is also in contention for the most exciting one, is the Ravens going up against the Bills. Obviously, two MVP candidates in Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. and they both have a very solid team. While the Bills, they on paper they have the better record. I think the Ravens are a much better team. They also had to play in a much more difficult conference than the Bills had to play in, despite the fact that the Bills ended up losing to the Patriots at one point. But that's besides the point. I think the Ravens team, they definitely have more star power. If Lamar can't get anything going, then they have Derrick Henry, who's a really good option on the ground, and is usually faster than most secondaries in the league. So they also, similar to the Eagles destroying the Rams in the regular season, the Ravens destroyed the Bills in the regular season in that one matchup. So whether or not they're going to be able to beat them again, I mean, they really embarrassed Josh Allen in that game, which should be the clear-cut deciding factor on who the MVP should be, by the way, but that's also neither here nor there. But again, personally, I think that isn't it going to snow in the Buffalo game? I think it was I saw that it was going to snow in the Philly game. So again, I wouldn't really be that surprised if it decides to if it snows in Buffalo, because we know Buffalo gets a lot of snow over there. But if it snows in Philly, then again, would not be surprised if it's going to snow in Buffalo on that same day. But nothing that I heard of. But even if there was snow, I still don't think it would affect either one of those teams. I mean, it's not like it's Miami in the snow, because both of those, the Ravens and the Bills, they're sort of used to playing in the cold weather. Unlike, because we've seen several Miami Dolphins matchups against the Bills where the Dolphins, they seem to be like they're going to be the team that wins at the end of the day, but then when it snows, that's immediately when the Dolphins start to play worse, and it's very apparent when it does happen. But I'm not sure that's going to happen in this game, and if it did, it wouldn't have much effect. So that's all that I have in this third segment. So now we're going into the fourth segment where I talk about Miami most likely going to play in Madrid for next season. So speaking of Miami, I know I'll talk about that right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we're going to talk about Miami most likely going to play a game in Madrid, becoming the first NFL team to play a game there. Before I do that, though, I want to answer Fettuccini's question in the chat. He's wondering who's going to go to the Super Bowl. I think that this Super Bowl, from the beginning, I thought it was going to be Ravens-Lions, but it's either going to be them. I still want to think that it's going to be the Ravens or the Lions, but I also do not want to lack faith in Patrick Mahomes, because he is that guy in the postseason. He's like a boogeyman over there. So I really want to say Ravens Lions Super Bowl, but I would not be surprised if it ends up turning into a Chiefs versus Lions Super Bowl, where everybody in the world is going to want the Lions to win as opposed to the Chiefs winning. And personally, I would much rather see the Chiefs win because I do not want to see a bunch of Detroit fans just screaming their heads off at the fact that they finally won a Super Bowl after being in the league since like 1950 something or whatever. But again, the 2025 season, Miami is going to try playing a game in Madrid, and they're going to be considered the home team over in Madrid. And this stems from what the game represents for the NFL's top international market, which is surprisingly the Hispanic market. The connection between Miami and Madrid bridges an ocean, uniting a shared culture, which is a culture that likes the NFL. And to be honest, it makes sense why a lot of fans of Madrid are going to end up being fans of Miami, because I don't know if it has entirely to do with this, but we know Lionel Messi, he plays for Inter Miami in soccer right now, and ever since he went over to the United States to play soccer, Inter Miami has gotten way more attention and has gotten way more fans, and people who are Real Madrid fans, right, like that have seen and grown up watching Messi play, are going to tune into a lot of Miami games because of Messi himself, right? So I think that the fan base from Madrid over to Miami is also, carrying over in football as well. And the United States, obviously NFL is the most popular sport in the entirety of the United States amongst all major sports, and stadiums are packed every week. Some teams even have season tickets on wait lists, and some teams have they've had this stretch for years. Television ratings confirm that this is just the dominant sport of the United States, with NFL games consistently occupying the majority of spots in the annual top 100 broadcasts. And it's not just, traditional TV either that's taking the NFL by storm. Streaming services highlight NFL's appeal. Like we know, Thursday Night Football on Prime Video has reached record-breaking audiences. The NFL's Christmas game debut ended up surpassing NBA viewership, which, the NBA, they tried to make Christmas a basketball holiday, but right now it seems like the NFL is doing a lot better job at that, at making it a football holiday, right? But in the U.S., there's obviously no debate which sport is the most popular sport and which sport gains the most traction. Fettuccine is wondering, where will Tyreek Hill be next season? I have absolutely no idea. And I don't think even Tyreek Hill knows where he wants to go, because based off of how he played in the previous season, he's not worth all that money. We know how good Tyreek Hill is, but based off of last season with the stats that he got, he is not worth all of that money. Like just off of last season alone, he's not worth that kind of money. And it's really I feel like a lot of teams are going to feel like it's going to be a little bit of a risky move to try and pay a wide receiver who's making as much money as he is. Now, keep in mind that his salary back in when he signed the contract, it was let me just see here. Let me just go ahead and get the dollar bills. He signed a 3-year, $90 million contract with the Dolphins, which includes a $7 million signing bonus, $59 million guaranteed, all that stuff. That's a lot of guaranteed money given to somebody who put up less than mediocre numbers and did not even make it to the to an all-pro team, did not make it to the Pro Bowl, did not get any accolades in this season whatsoever. Again, this is a very bad season. From going off of 2 straight seasons, averaging 1,700 receiving yards. And even despite that, 2 seasons before that, where he got over 1,000 yards in the air, he only recorded 959 receiving yards in this season, only 81 receptions. And even in the even in the years where he's recorded at the very least 80 receptions, he does get 1,000 yards in that season, but he did not do so in this one. He also only caught 6 touchdowns. Statistically, that's the worst total touchdowns he's ever had to end the season, especially after coming off of the season where he caught 13 of them. Like, that's a lot of money to be giving to somebody. And again, he played in every single game last season, so it's not like he missed any games. He was just bad. Like, he was just not even a factor. Will the Cowboys pay him all that money? I don't know. I also don't think, again, he said he wants to go to a place that's competing. I don't think that the Cowboys are a team that is considered a competing team. And I don't think Tyreek Hill would want to go to that team because, not to mention, like, the jokes surrounding that team. The fact that they are way worse than what they were the last 2 years, and the last 2 years they were pretty disappointing. And I don't know if Tyreek's really going to want to do with that. A lot of people are assuming that he's going to go back to Kansas City to try and win some championships and things like that. I don't know if that's really going to happen. I don't know if the Chiefs are going to be willing to pay him that much money, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the Chiefs would have to be a really dumb team to try and not bring Tyreek Hill back in. I mean, that dynamic duo of Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes, it was almost unstoppable. But more so on Miami and the situation around Madrid. Across the Atlantic, the NFL's popularity in Europe is continuing to rise. The UK and Germany are already becoming established strongholds to bear witness to these NFL games. London gets an annual October game, as we know, and Germany is quickly going to follow suit with games in Munich, Frankfurt, and as well as a debut in Berlin going into next season. So this is where Spain and Madrid in particular and the Miami Dolphins are going to play a pivotal role. Spain is both part of Europe and a hub of Hispanic culture, so it would mix very well, and it would bring in a lot of audiences from different intersections of their groups to this NFL expansion game. And with the Madrid game, the NFL gains a Hispanic and European capital, while the legendary Santiago Bernabeu Stadium becomes the stage for a cultural fusion, right? So fans from across Europe, fans from across Latin America, fans from across the Miami and the Dolphins, and fans of the Dolphins are going to come together and are going to play in this, and are going to partake in this NFL competition over in Madrid. So it's going to be very interesting. Now, Spain is set to become the 6th country to host the NFL after Mexico, Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, and Brazil. All of those countries have hosted an NFL game before. This is a great win for Spain, but it's also a tremendous opportunity and a great win for the NFL overall. Strategically, culturally, and athletically, Spain offers a lot of value, and as much global sports of a powerhouse as any of the other European states. Now, Spain is a perfect partner for the NFL, and it's really it's a really good match, not to mention how a lot of Madrid fans are already fans of Miami and their soccer team. So moving over and being a fan of several Florida teams, there's like 3 of them, it opens up a lot of options and a lot of new fans. So that's all that I have in this 4th segment. So now we're going to go into the 5th segment where I just recap all of the NBA games that took place yesterday. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested. Will the NFL ever do a Pro Bowl in Europe? I doubt that. Even though it would be a lot easier for them to do that than to schedule a game over in Europe. It would be a lot easier for the Pro Bowl to be done over in Europe. I think that's not a bad idea, but I don't think that's really going to attract a lot of viewers. But we'll see how that goes. But we're going to go into this recap right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we're going to just do a quick recap of all of the NBA games that took place yesterday. So before I do that, Fettuccini's in the chat. He asked one more question. How can the NBA fix their viewership? Now, there's a couple of things that they can do to fix their viewership. The first one that fans would like is for you to stop shooting threes. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think the best way to fix the NBA's viewership is to make these games a little bit easier for their fans to watch, because that's really like the biggest problem. Like every single day, these NBA games are on completely different channels, and they're on different streaming services. So being able to sit down and find an NBA game is not as easy as being able to sit down and find an NFL game, because usually the NFL, they already have they've established Red Zone. They've also already established YouTube TV, so it gives multiple fans, the option to watch different teams. But usually the team that most people are going to gravitate towards is like their local team, and their local team, they do have, there's obviously cable, but there's also some games that are now being streamed on the NFL that have already, and they now have they have an established platform of being like responsible for broadcasting these NFL games. So people know where to find these NFL games, but being able to find these NBA games is a little bit it's not entirely clear. So what most people do is they try to watch these NBA games on like illegal streaming sites and Discord servers that are streaming the game, things like that. So while people are watching the games, it's not going to come up in the viewership numbers as other people tuning into that game, right? Like the NBA is not generating any kind of revenue with those people streaming the game on a Discord or something like that. So the NBA, if it really wants to try and regain its viewership, then it's going to have to make it a little bit easier to view these games. So he also asked one more question. Is it true that NBA wants to try to cast games on Tubi? I'm pretty sure they've already started doing that. And they're planning on broadcasting NBA games on practically every single streaming service, at least one throughout there's going to be at least one game every single day of the week that's going to be on a streaming service, whether it be Peacock, whether it be Amazon Prime, whether it would be Paramount Plus, something like that. There's at least going to be one game after the after the NFL season concludes, So, and that's also another problem. It's like, having all of these streaming services, like you need to have Peacock, you need to have Paramount, you need to have ESPN Plus, you need to have Amazon Prime, all of this random subscriptions to watch these NBA games, to only watch the second half of the NBA. So that's definitely not going to be an issue that they're going to be able to fix like that. But they're going to have to establish you can make your own NFL Red Zone, something that's around that popularity, market it to be that popular, where it's like, oh, this is the number one streaming service to watch these NBA games, blah blah blah. If you do that, then you're probably going to gain some viewership, because people are actually going to be able to tune into these games using their own TV and not someone else's. So that's my thought. Again, it's easier said than done, and it's way more complicated than what I just said. I'm sure there's way more steps that need to be put into place before that. So, first game that we have on this recap, the Pacers, they ended up beating the Pistons 111-110. And, it seems like the Pacers are back on track into winning, but again, the Pistons are not a very good team. Tim Hardaway Jr. had 25 points. Jalen Duren had 17 points and 17 rebounds. On the Pacers side, Miles Turner had 28, and Pascal Siakam had 26, 7, 7, and 4. So, pretty solid game from the Pacers and a pretty solid game from the Pistons, but the scoreboard would have you think that it was a blowout. And in this Wizards matchup, the Suns, they ended up beating the Wizards by 7 points. Devin Booker had 37, Kevin Durant had 23, Grayson Allen had 21, and no Bradley Beal in this one. But again, it was clearly enough to beat this Washington team who was just absolutely terrible. Alexander Czar had 16 points, Jordan Poole had 18 points, but again, it just wasn't enough. Even with Kayshawn George's 24 points coming off the bench, it was not enough. Now, the Cavs, they ended up losing to the Thunder 134 to 114. SGA had 40 points in this one with 8 assists. Jalen Williams had 19 points. Lou Dort had 22 points. And this is the 6th loss of the Cavs in this entire season. And with this loss, they are now tied with the Thunder in record. So I expect the Thunder to end up being ranked number 1 in the NBA power rankings going into next week. Garland had 20 points. Donovan Mitchell only had 8 points in this one, which is very lackluster. He shot 3 for 15 from the field and is the biggest reason why the Cavs ended up losing. The Clippers, they ended up beating the Portland Trail Blazers 118 to 89. Norman Powell had 23. James Harden had 19. No Kawhi Leonard in this one. As we know, his main priority is defending his home in Los Angeles because there's a bunch of fires and stuff going on over there. Fernie Simmons played 30 minutes, had 0 points, 0 for 9, 0 for 5 from 3. Scoot Henderson, 16 points. DeAndre Ayton, 14 points, but just a pitiful game from the Trailblazers. And finally, the Houston Rockets, they matched up against the Kings, and DeMar DeRozan destroyed them. He dropped 33 points. Sabonis had 20, 14, and 7, and Keegan Murray had 18 and 11, with De'Aaron Fox dropping 19. Now, it's not like Houston played bad, though. Amen Thompson had 20 and 10, Sengun had 21 and 10, Jalen Green had 28, but still that was not enough to go up against the Kings. Again, DeMar having a signature vintage 33-point performance is definitely going to help you, but still, I don't think this Kings team is nearly as good as they expected themselves to be. Right now, they're standing at 9th in the Western Conference, only because the Western Conference is ridiculously close, and the minute you win a game, you can move up like 2 seeds. I'm not even joking. Like, right now, the Kings are 21 and 20, and if they were to win a game, then they could see themselves move all the way up to the 7th or the 6th seed. If they win 2 games, then they definitely move up there. But it's like they could the standings can change like that. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Conference, the standings can only really change between the Knicks and the Celtics, and that's it. And those are the only top 2 teams that can actually legitimately change their standings. But the Bucks, the Magic, the Pacers, the Hawks, and the Heat, they could also change their standings, but like it's not nearly like the gap between the 2nd seed and the 4th seed and the gap between the 3rd seed and the 4th seed, they're not nearly as big as the gap between the 3rd and 4th seed in the West, as we know. So just a little bit of an update on how the season's going and the standings and things like that. So the Timberwolves, they're going to play the Knicks tonight. The Thunder, they're going to play the Mavericks. The Nets are going to play the Lakers. The Magic are going to play the Celtics. Bucks are playing the Raptors. Nuggets are playing the Heat. Jazz are playing the Pelicans. Hornets are playing the Bulls. And the Grizzlies are playing the Spurs. So with all that in mind, my picks are going to be the Knicks, the Thunder, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Bucks, the Nuggets, the Jazz, the Bulls, and the Grizzlies. We're going to go with those for today's picks. That's all that I have on today's segment. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take or a burning question or something you're dying to share. We're all ears, and if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. If that's not your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way as well. That's all that I have for today on this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson. Be sure to tune into the playoff games over the weekend, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a